Gentlemen, what is going on today? My name is Ryan Mickler. I'm your host. I'm also the founder of the Order of Man podcast and movement. Welcome here and welcome back. This is your Ask Me Anything. Now, last week you had the one and only Kip Sorensen solo host that podcast. Usually we do it together. He's traveling this week, so I am going to be solo hosting this podcast this week, for better or worse. Now, some of you had mentioned that Kip was telling dad jokes and laughing to himself, and I don't know what to say. He gets a little nervous at times, and it is what it is, and so we're working through that. So I'll make sure I talk to him about the dad jokes. You're not going to hear any of those from me. You're just going to hear the answers to your questions, for better or worse, and hopefully I've got some great answers for you. If you're curious about what this Order of Man thing is, head to orderofman.com. Obviously, subscribe to the podcast so you never miss. I want you to listen. You never miss a single podcast, whether it's this one, our Friday Field Notes, or our conversations with some incredibly powerful guests: Tim Tebow, Ben Shapiro, Andy Frisella, David Goggins, Jocko Willink, who else? Steve Ranella. And guys, we've got some incredible guests coming up. In fact, I'm going to be traveling this week, recording some phenomenal podcasts. So subscribe. Also check out our Battle Ready program at orderofman.com/battle ready. All right, guys, let's get into your questions. These ones specifically are coming from our Facebook group, which you can join for free at facebook.com/order of man. Nope, sorry. Facebook.com/groups/order of man. Groups/order of man. This one comes from Landon Overbeek. He says, can you iterate or clear things up on why friends aren't great choices to hold you accountable? I don't think that's entirely true. We'll get to that. He also says, example, shouldn't be friends with your battle team if they can't hold you accountable. What does their friendship benefit you? So I think there's a lot of assumptions in here. And I do want to clear this up because that's not at all what I said. What he's referring to is in our exclusive brotherhood, the Iron Council. I had made the comment to our team leaders not to get so close to your team members that you undermine your own leadership. I didn't say undermine your accountability. I said undermine your leadership. And I found this to be true in my life. If you're so close to your friends, or a better example would be so close to colleagues and coworkers, or maybe even subordinates. And I'm using that term because we all understand what it means. But let's say you're a boss or you're a team leader and you're going to get drunk every weekend with the people you're meant to lead. How long do you think that you're going to have any sort of credibility, influence, and authority with them? The answer is not very long. So you can have friends, you can be accountable, you can hold each other accountable. But if you're undermining that authority by doing things that you shouldn't be doing, or by acting like a fool, or not acting like a leader, or not being a good partner, then it ain't going to work. So what you need to realize and understand is the role of the relationship. I have friends that we casually get together periodically and we talk about deep issues. We have deep and meaningful conversations. And then I have other friends that I completely let loose with. So what I'm saying is just understand your role. Same thing with your wife. You can see a picture of me when I had the longer beard and my beautiful wife. I'm not going to undermine my influence and credibility with my wife by acting ridiculous, or maybe even doing the same things that I might do with some of my friends, because then that undermines my ability to lead her effectively and to lead these four little ones right here above my, I think that's my right ear. And so that's a challenge. So know what your role is. Know your role is what we often hear. Is your role to be buddy? Another great example. I'm not friends with my kids. Okay, they're not my friends. Now we are friendly. There are elements and dynamics of friendship, but I'm never going to step off the mantle of father down to this lower tier of friend. When I was growing up, I had a couple of friends who had parents that were more like friends than they were parents. And I thought they were so cool that they could do whatever they want. They didn't have curfews. Their parents didn't check in on them. Man, I thought that was so cool. And looking at it now, I think, man, It actually probably would have been a good idea if that parent would have been a mother or would have been a father. And I think that would have drastically and radically improved somebody's life. So know your role and then fill that role. And we have a lot of different people in our lives to fill different roles. And if you're treating your wife like your buddy, or you're treating your kids like they're solely your friends and you want them to like you and that's it, then you're going to undermine your ability to lead them effectively. And that's exactly what they need from you. My sons and daughter don't need me to be their friend. They have friends. They need me to be their father. The leaders in the Iron Council don't need you to be buddy-buddy with them. They need a leader. They have enough friends. You're not their friend. You're their leader. So understand your role, fill that role, and make it happen. All right, let's go to the next one. This one comes from Paulo Perna. He says, how do you deal with wanting your kids to do well more than they want to do well for themselves? How do we inspire without being an overbearing parent? Well, the first way you inspire children, or anybody for that matter, is by example. And I don't want to leave it there because that could be considered a cop-out, but that is very, very important. They're going to pay more attention to you specifically and especially over the long term based on what you're doing, not on what you're saying. So if you're telling them they have to be in shape and be fit and be strong and be athletic, and yet you're 30, 40, 50 pounds overweight, probably not going to inspire them to do that. If you're telling them that they have to manage their finances or have to build wealth for their families so they can put food on their table, but you struggle to make the mortgage or the rent, you're probably not going to have a whole lot of influence with those kids over a long and sustained period of time. Now, let's be real. Kids are interested in different things than we are as men, or at least they should be. If your kid is interested in what you are as a mature man, then that's a bit of an anomaly, and that's okay. We need to feed into that. But if you're interested in the same thing your kids are interested in, okay, that actually might be a problem. So are you a man or are you a child? And how are you behaving and how are you showing up? And then look, just because they are interested in different things doesn't mean that they can't see what it is you're doing and they can't be inspired by what you're doing. But ultimately, it's your job to filter growth and expansion through their lens. In other words, you have to meet children where they are. If I was to talk with my kids about options and futures and derivatives and cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, their eyes are going to glaze over and they're going to be completely lost and they're not going to be inspired by that. But if I say, hey, you can earn some money and you can buy a Lego, I'm not going to buy it for you, but if you want to earn some money and work for it, then you can go out and buy your own Lego set. That's language they get. Same concepts, financial principles, but it's language they understand. We go to CrossFit as a family. My family goes about 4 times a week. I go twice a week because I have other things I'm engaged with. And they have a kids class at the CrossFit organization that we go to, the gym that we go to. And the kids are separated from the adults. So the adults do the adult workout and the kids do the kid workout. And the kid workout does not consist of every minute on the minute workouts or, these specific hero WODs. It consists of setting up some cones and running around and doing jumping jacks and having relay races and competing with each other and things that are going to engage them in a meaningful and significant way. So if you're struggling to connect with your kids, I would have you really, really evaluate whether or not you're trying to talk to them like an adult or you're trying to talk to them where they currently are, based on where they are, and filtering your desire to lead, influence, inspire, and motivate them through a lens they can understand and one they recognize. Because if you do it through your own lens, you're going to struggle. This is the same thing with adults, by the way. If you're talking to your colleagues and your coworkers through your own lens, you might miss a lot of opportunity to communicate effectively and serve those individuals. Think about what inspires them. Think about what motivates them. Think about what drives them. And you don't have to be judgmental about that. It is what it is. So embrace it and then filter your language and your conversations through their lens, not through your own. All right, next question. This one comes from Colin Hatcher. It's a bit of a longer one, so I'm going to click on that. He says, any advice for a happy divorce? I don't totally like that term, but let's keep reading here. My wife and I are filing when we return from my overseas military assignment. The choice is final for us and mutual. We are still good friends, and we want to keep it that way for our son. I know there will be stressors and roadblocks that come up, not to mention the traditional perceptions of a lot of people that have divorces have to be competitive. Well, that last point, you don't really need to worry about that, especially if your children are young. You don't need to buy into the notion of what their divorce was like or what society says it should be or what it typically is. You don't need to buy into that nonsense. So just forget about that last point altogether. It doesn't matter what society says or what other people say it should or could be. What matters is what you guys want it to be. Now, happy, I don't know, maybe there's some happy divorces out there. It sounds like it's amicable, which is good. I'm not too concerned with it necessarily being happy, but what I would suggest is that it continue to be amicable, that you continue to attempt, if you can, to be friends, if possible. And then what I would suggest is making sure that you never diminish or downplay or criticize your wife in front of your kids. If you want her to have a better chance of being connected with you so you can have a connection with your kids, then the best thing that you can do is to honor her for who she is and what her role is. Now, I know a lot of you listening to that are saying, well, there's no redeeming qualities about my ex-wife. And while maybe that's true to a degree, or maybe you think that's true, I bet there's some redeeming qualities. I bet she cares deeply about her kids. I bet that she has a lot of benefits. If that weren't the case, you probably wouldn't have married her in the first place. So what I would suggest to you is to go back to and consider that maybe there's some things that you're overlooking because of your own amount of vitriol and hostility and clouded judgment because of your own emotional trauma and baggage that you're carrying around. And that's natural. That's to be expected. But we're not going to make decisions emotionally. We're going to make decisions rationally. And rationally, she probably has some redeeming qualities. Rationally, it's likely that she cares about her kids. Rationally, it's probably likely that she still has feelings for you. Maybe not romantic necessarily, but she still cares about you. Just the same way through all the clouded noise and chaos and clutter and maybe even anger and hostility, you probably have feelings for her as well. So remember that it's not about you. Remember that it's not about the kids. And remember that, it's not about her, I should say, and that it is about the kids. It is about making sure that they can honor and respect their mother. It's about edifying and uplifting her so you're not undermining her authority or influence with the kids, and also asking her to do the same. And by the way, if you do those things for her, then it's more likely, not a guarantee, but more likely that she will do those things for you. So let go of the ego, let go of the emotional baggage, see it for what it is, try to make the best of a difficult circumstance, whether it's amicable or not, and try to serve the kids as best you can. That's what I would suggest. All right. What else? This one comes from Dylan Justice. He says, how do you establish healthy boundaries with a narcissistic mother? Now, I don't know what a narcissistic mother means. That could mean a lot of different things. Obviously, narcissistic, she's wrapped up in herself and she's self-absorbed. I understand what the word narcissistic means, but I'm saying that it could be or manifest in 1,000 different ways. Does she think that she should be able to dictate the tone of your relationship and the way that you parent the kids? Maybe. Does she want everything that you and your wife and children do to revolve around her? Maybe. I don't entirely know what this means. So it's a very broad question. So broadly and generally, the answer would be that you've just got to work with your wife. You've got to talk with your wife. You've got to figure out what you guys want to do, what you want to accomplish, what you want your kids to be doing, what you want that relationship to look like, what you will specifically tolerate and what you won't. You've got to be willing to put your foot down. But the biggest thing here is you need to get your wife on board, because if I remember, let me look, this is your, well, it says your mother. So maybe not even your mother-in-law. You just tell her, hey, we don't appreciate when you act this way, and you're not going to act this way. And if you do, there's consequences. And what are the consequences? Well, you don't get to see your grandkids. You don't get to spend time with us. Now, you might think, well, that's harsh. Well, you're giving her the option. You're not telling her she doesn't get to see her grandkids. You're saying that contingent upon you behaving the way that we want you to behave, you will have the opportunity to have a relationship with your grandkids. But if you're not going to behave in an appropriate manner, then yeah, there's consequences to that. There's challenges to that. There's a boundary in place that says that you will not behave this way. And sometimes when people ask these questions, I think what they're hoping is that I'll give them an easy answer where feelings won't get hurt. Well, guys, feelings are going to get hurt. That's the nature of boundaries. Because if you didn't need a boundary in place, then you wouldn't be asking this question. If everything was hunky-dory and you guys had a great relationship and there were no issues, you wouldn't be asking about boundaries. But there are issues. And so you need to establish boundaries and put these things in place, knowing that it's going to be hard. That you're going to have some serious conversations about what you will tolerate as a husband and wife and what you will not tolerate. And then when she bumps up against those things, she actually needs to experience the consequence of her decisions. Now, that doesn't mean indefinitely. If she steps over the line once, that you cut her off forever and always. But you explain, hey, I told you this was a boundary. You're not going to undermine what we're doing, for example, as parents. You're not going to undermine our discipline protocol, if you will, for the way we administer discipline to our children, and then think that we're going to let you hang out with the kids and babysit the kids. Now, sometimes the problem is that it's convenient to have your mother there or your father or mother or father-in-law there because, well, you got to work and the wife has to work. And so she babysits the kids. Okay, well, that's not a sovereign man. You're beholden to her. So your biggest concern is not that you want to express your concerns with her undermining your own authority with your kids. It's that you won't have a babysitter if you say these things. So you need to make sure you shore up that end too. What are you relying on your mother? What are you relying on with your father or in-laws? And are you in the position to be making and setting boundaries? Because there's going to be a sacrifice. You're going to have an uncomfortable conversation with her, and you might be burning some of those bridges. And I'd be willing to bet, I don't want to rush to conclusions here, but I'd be willing to bet the biggest concern you have is that you lose some of the convenience in your own life. And well, that just isn't a boundary, is it? It isn't principled if there's exceptions to it. Figure out some alternative solutions that you might risk should you bring these conversations up. All right, next. This one comes from Josh Walk. He says, try to get Tim Ballard on. Guys, I have had Tim Ballard on. And in fact, I just reached out to him via email last week to have him on the podcast. If you want to shoot him an email or you're connected with him, or even if you know Tim and you have an in, have Tim and I connect, reach out to him, make a mutual introduction, and Tim and I will get out after it with Operation Underground Railroad. I think he's doing really, really powerful and very heroic, quite literally heroic things in human trafficking. So yeah, I would love to have Tim back on. Please connect with him if you can and let him know. And also, if you want to hear the first conversation that I had with Tim, go to orderofman.com/Tim Ballard, orderofman.com/Tim Ballard. And by the way, if you want to hear any conversation that I've had with any of my guests, then just type in orderofman.com/whatever the guest name is. So if you want to hear the Goggins interview, go to orderofman.com/David Goggins. If you want to hear one of the Jocko interviews, go to orderofman.com/Jocko or /Jocko1, Jocko2, Jocko3, or Jocko4. If you want to hear a conversation with Tim Tebow, orderofman.com/Tim Tebow. It's all right there, guys. You can find it. But we have had Tim Ballard on, and we are working to get him back on the podcast. Dustin Stokes says, as my boys become older, they're hearing and experiencing more sexual content on a wide front. No doubt about that. Since you have boys at varying ages, what do those conversations look like for guiding them through what's appropriate, what's not, when it's appropriate, etc.? Mine are 9 and 11, so we are in that phase and learning a lot, and it's not always within my control to shield them. Well, we don't really want to shield them, right? That's not really what we want to do. We don't want to shield or bubble wrap our kids. What we want to do is we want to introduce our children to concepts and ideas and conflicting thoughts and ideologies in controlled environments. So I'm a huge advocate for homeschool. A lot of you guys obviously know about that. And anytime I mention homeschool, inevitably I get the guy who's like, well, I want my kids to be introduced to conflicting ideas. Right. And so do I. And conflicting ideas aren't exclusively found within the government school system. I can introduce my children to conflicting thoughts and ideas. And by the way, they're going to hear about it from their friends and buddies and on the football field and all these different places in the news, and even watching cartoons now from Disney Plus about homosexual and gay and bi and all this kind of weird stuff on cartoons from my 5-year-old. Okay, so they're going to hear about it. So it isn't that they can only hear conflicting ideas in the government school system. You should be bringing these things up. But oftentimes we as men don't talk about these things because they're uncomfortable and they're awkward. And I don't want to talk about penises and vaginas to my kids. Like, that isn't something I want to do. There's plenty of woke type people who would love to talk about penises and vaginas with my children, but that's not one of them. And I'm not going to allow other people individually to do that. Okay. So I need to get out of my own way, and I need to have conversations with my kids about what is right and what is wrong. So when these people say, well, we introduce them to different ideas and you can only do that in school. Okay. My thought is children are quite literally incapable of discerning fact from fiction. My son, he's almost 10 years old. He was crying the other night at bed. And I said, what are you crying about? He said, I'm worried about the chupacabra. The chupacabra. He's 10 years old. I said, bro, is that a real thing? What is that? And he's like, it's this scary monster thing or whatever. I'm like, is that real? Is the chupacabra real? And he's like, no. I said, well, why are you afraid? Because it feels real. Right. See, he's closer to the truth than so many of these adults are. Kids are incapable of discerning between reality and fiction. They're incapable of separating their thoughts and their feelings. And so when I introduce my children, or somebody else introduces my children to different concepts and different ideas, and I don't give them a healthy lens in which to view that, then they're going to view it in an unhealthy lens, and they're going to accept it as reality. So I can't tell you who asked this question, Dustin. I can't tell you exactly what you should say to your kids. I don't know their maturity level. I don't know what they're experiencing. I don't know what they're going through. But what I do know is And what I'm willing to bet is that you aren't comfortable having these conversations, which is why you're asking the question. But these conversations are going to be uncomfortable. So deal with that. And what we do is we introduce these ideas in controlled environments, and we work through them, and we ask questions. That's important. What do you know about sex? What do you know about little girls? What do you know about little boys? If one of your kids brings to you some sort of woke gender ideology nonsense, you say, what have you heard? What do you know about that? What do you think about that? And then you can get a pretty good idea and bearing about where they are, which will help you formulate a better, more cohesive answer, in one that's going to help serve them in a meaningful and productive way. Guys, your voice as a father needs to be the loudest, because you got Disney and you got Netflix and you got school and you got government and you got all these people out there trying to brainwash your kids into ideology. In fact, I talked about this on a post on Instagram just recently. And I can't remember exactly how it came to be, but they were talking about how brainwashing or something doesn't happen with kids. And I basically told the same thing, that kids are incapable of discernment. And the guy wrote back and he's like, well, it sounds like you're trying to indoctrinate your kids into your bias. Right, dummy. That's the point. I'm the parent. You're not. The fact that you morons don't understand this baffles me. You got to be a freaking fool to believe that I'm not here to indoctrinate my kids into a value system that I believe will serve them. Now, you don't need to agree with me, but guess what? They're my kids. I don't always agree with my sister, the way that she raises her kids. I don't always agree with my in-laws, the way they raise their kids, but they're not my kids. Those are their kids and mine are my kids. So yeah, I am indoctrinating them to a value system. And yes, it is biased by design. God saw fit that I have my kids. So I'll raise mine, you raise yours, and that's it, period. Now, if those kids are in danger, that's one thing. And that's a whole other conversation because wokesters are trying to change the definition of violence and danger and this and that. And, that's a whole other rabbit hole we can go down, but we're not going to go down it right now. But you got to be a freaking moron to believe that it's not my job to teach my kids ideology based on my own personal bias. That's the point. All right. Whew. Big breath. Don Pullen. Do you have days when you wake up unmotivated to tackle the world, grow men, and grow a family? If so, what do you do to get the motivation to perform? Don, the answer is yes, 100%. Every day. Not every day. A lot of days. I'll say this. Every day there's things that I don't want to do. Occasionally I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to do anything. And what do? I do it. I don't need your motivation. I don't need your fluffy fairy tale bullshit to get me doing what I should be doing, what I know I should be doing, what I've committed to do. All I have to do is do it. And so I get this planner out right here. This is my daily planner that I use. I've always got it with me. You guys can check it out at store.orderoman.com. It's always right here. And yeah, I have this and I write in it what I need to do today. And last night I wrote in it about what I need to accomplish. And this morning I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, well, I need to do an Ask Me Anything podcast. I need to reach out to these people. I need to do these things. And then guess what? I do them. I don't care how I feel. Okay. It doesn't matter if I feel motivated or inspired to do something. It's on my freaking list. So I do it and I accomplish it and I tackle it. And some days it's going through the motion, admittedly. And other days I'm super motivated and inspired because maybe I had some good sleep or, maybe things are firing on all cylinders in my life or whatever. And so then I do it then. And maybe some days I feel like garbage and I didn't get enough sleep. Maybe I'm sore. Maybe I'm in a bad mood and I do it because that's what I said I would do. And I'm a man of my word and I place value and I take pride in being a man of my word. And if I wake up and I don't do that list, then I'm out of integrity. And that to me is not acceptable. So it isn't about motivation and inspiration and fluffy fairy tale bullcrap. It's about doing what you said you were going to do because you committed to being a man of your word. So how do I get motivated? I ask myself, am I going to be a man of my word today? Or am I going to be a liar? Period. And then I do what I need to do. Nate Howard Osborne. He says, through my life, he's 26. I've had a number of men take some kind of interest in helping me grow as a man, but none of them have really stayed in my life for more than a year or two. Not necessarily a requirement. That's my own adage there. He says, my dad was around when I was younger, but was not present or much of a role model. I have two young boys, 2 and 4 years old, and I'm trying to develop myself to be a great example, role model, and mentor for them, but I've always struggled to find one myself as I live in a fairly remote area in Australia, and there aren't many men who I resonate with, who I would want to learn from, and that I have access to in this part of the world. Well, come on now. You have access to everybody. We have the internet, for crying out loud. So access is everywhere. This is his question. What would you suggest doing to gain better access to men of purpose who are worthy of being role models in order to build better relationships with them that are long lasting and beneficial to them also? Well, the first thing I would say is we got to address this long lasting thing right here. Like, I think what you're looking for is a daddy, and that ship has sailed, my friend. And I know that sucks. My dad wasn't around for a lot of my life. I had a couple of stepfathers come into my life. My stepfathers I haven't talked with for probably 15, 20 years. Okay. Like, relationships come and go, and not all relationships are meant to be forever. And just because you have a short-term relationship with somebody who might be a mentor or a guide or a coach or a counselor or just a friend, a man in your life, doesn't mean there isn't value in that. So I think the first thing we need to do is let go of the notion that we have to have this, Obi-Wan Kenobi type figure in our life forever. We don't. In fact, it's just not going to work like that unless you have some men, some high caliber men in your family. Like if your dad's around, maybe you're 26, like you said, maybe you're 40, like I am, almost 41. I think I will be 41 as the release of this podcast. And so maybe your dad's around for 40 years. Maybe you're around for, 60 years of your life, or even 70 years of your life. Or maybe he's around for 2 years of your life. Is it any less important? No. So let's get over this lifelong mentor thing, number one. And then the other thing is look for the people who you want to have in your life. And where do those men congregate? Well, they go to church. Okay. They are very involved in their community. So that might be a Rotary type club or some sort of charitable organization. They're also a lot of times business owners. And so they're going to Chamber of Commerce events and business luncheons. They're very involved in entrepreneur networks. They have their own events. They have their own courses. They have their own programs. They have their own podcasts. And so you tap into those things. Like I have people in my life that I've met through the podcast who now we're personal friends. And I don't see them all the time. I don't talk to them every single day, but every month or two, maybe I'll reach out to Bert Soren with Sorenex, who's a good friend of mine and somebody I admire and respect. And we'll talk. Or I'll connect with Pete Roberts, with the founder of Origin, and somebody I highly respect and look up to and admire, not only as a friend, but as a businessman and a family man and somebody who has big dreams and aspirations. And I'll shoot him a message and say, hey, man, I'm struggling with this one thing. Can you give me a bit of feedback or advice? And we hop on a call. Right. So look at these relationships for what they are and know that just because they're not long-term relationships, that they can't be valuable. They can, and they should. And then what we do is we hand select the people that we need in our lives to be able to accomplish the things that we want to accomplish. But in the meantime, to say that you don't have access to anybody is kind of ridiculous. I mean, you're listening to this podcast. You can go listen to Jocko's podcast or Andy Frisilla's podcast or Tom Bilyeu or like whoever's podcast you listen to. You can sign up for a course. Like you can get on a plane and you can fly somewhere to a course that's taking place. And even if you don't, you can hop on a Zoom call and join, the Iron Council. That's our exclusive brotherhood. You can connect digitally with 1,200 plus other men who are all working towards the same objectives and desires and goals and dreams and ambitions. It might not be face to face, but it's the next best thing. And also there's Iron Council members in Australia that you can connect with face to face. And then you can look at church, you can look at chamber, you can look at Rotary, and you can find the guys where they are and meet them where they are. All right. I hope you guys can't hear my squeaking chair. It's been squeaking today. So I apologize about that. It is what it is. Let's take a couple more. This one comes from Joshua Trott. What's funny is that these questions or these names are so simple. I know Kip likes to butcher your names, but I can't help but feel I've got some simple names today. Joshua Trott. My question is about discernment from a dad perspective, when to apply discipline or to apply compassion and empathy. As a full-time dad, I am finding difficult to balance filling both roles generally assigned to two parents. The premise is off on this one, Joshua. The premise is way off. Okay. Let me pick this apart a little bit out of a care for you. Okay. It's not to get after you. It's out of care for what we perceive here. The last sentence says, I'm finding it difficult to balance filling both roles generally assigned to two parents. Like who said that fathers can't be compassionate and empathetic? Who told you that a mother can't have some discipline and structure in her kids' life? Like that's not true. Now, generally, I know what you're saying is that we might be more of the authoritarian and a wife might be more nurturing in her role, but it's not that we can't be compassionate and empathetic. It's actually just the way that we exhibit it. So let me give you an example. You've got a 5 or 6 year old and they're learning to ride their bike and they're on the driveway and she looks at you and she's so happy and she's got her little tassels coming out of the end of her handlebars and she's got the little pink and blue Barbie bike and she's, got the helmet on or whatever. And she's cycling around the driveway and she's looking at you and you can't help but love that little smile. And then she crashes and she scrapes her knee. And then mom rushes over and she's like, oh my gosh, my princess. let me pick you up and let me wipe away your boo-boo with my own tears, and then we'll put a Smurf band-aid on it, and we'll just kiss you and hug you and love you. And that's what women do. And what do men do? Hey, hun, ow, that looks like it hurt. I'll stand right by here. Yeah, I'll stand right by you. Get up. You're okay. You can do it. I know you want to cry. Don't cry. Get up. Go ahead and wipe that little gravel out of your knee right there. Just wipe it off. Yep. Okay, good. Now get back on the bike. I'm going to give you a little push and we're going to get going. Right? That's what the dad does. Is one more empathetic than the other? No. It's not more empathetic to put a Smurf Band-Aid on your daughter's knee who scrapes it because she fell off the bike than it is to say, hey, hon, wipe it off and get back on the bike. No, one is not more empathetic than the other. It's just a different approach to empathy. See, what the lens in which men view it is, I want to empower you. I want to make you strong. I want you to know that you're capable of overcoming difficult and challenging things. And a woman is like, I want you to know you're loved. I want you to know you're supported. I want you to know you're in a safe place. I want you to feel important. You see, it's not wrong. It's not wrong at all. It's just different. So I can be a disciplinary if I need to be because my kids are getting out of line, and simultaneously be empathetic. Because if my oldest son does something stupid, something he shouldn't be doing, and I discipline him for it, aren't I being empathetic? Because if I wasn't, what would I do? Nothing. I would let him get away with it. But I don't let him get away with it. Why? Because I care. I care. I want my kids to win. I want them to thrive. And when they make poor choices, I want them to experience the weight of their decisions so they don't make those poor choices, so they live a better life. That's empathy, my friend. That is empathy. I care. I feel you. I know where you're coming from. I've been there. And when I was there, my dad and mom did this, and it helped me and it served me. And so I'm going to exhibit the same characteristics. I'm going to teach you the same lessons that I was taught as a young man. And that is the definition of empathy. Now, women, they do the same thing, and they're not being any less empathetic. They're just exhibiting it in a different way. So let's get over the idea and the notion that discipline has to be a hard-ass, hard-line stance. Like, I don't care about you and I'm going to be a drill instructor. I mean, maybe it has some of that tinge to it, but it comes from a place of love, of empathy, of care, of just genuine desire to sacrifice and serve your children long-term. And that means you'll make better decisions in the short term. All right, two more. Bryn, Dubs, Taylor, or Brian. So, okay, I said these names were easy, and then I get this one. It's either Bryn or Brian, Dubs, Taylor. What does the average, quote, just getting by, unquote, man waste the most money on that the successful man does not? I'm going to give you a very general answer because it's different for everybody, but it's shit that doesn't move the needle. So successful men will invest in themselves, right? They'll typically buy nicer clothes because that's an investment in their image, which helps their influence. They'll invest in hobbies and tools and equipment that are going to bring some sort of fulfillment, satisfaction, and joy into their lives, which helps them have more peace and abundance and fulfillment. They'll hire coaches and they'll hire mentors because they know if they hire a coach, then that coach is going to instruct them on how to build their life better or build their business better. And then it becomes an investment. So if I pay $10,000 for a coach and he teaches me something that yields $1 million or $10 million over my lifetime, I'm happily willing to make that trade. An unsuccessful man, or a quote, just getting by man, like you said, will invest in things that aren't going to bring any sort of long-term satisfaction or fulfillment. So they might drink, they might gamble, they might, who knows, buy all sorts of things that ultimately aren't going to serve them. They're going to waste money. They're going to be just kind of, frivolous with the way they spend it. They aren't going to be real intelligent about how they put their money into important things. They're going to buy cheap things typically more often than not because they don't see the value of quality. This is what just getting by men waste their money on. So it's not that they spend less. They might relative to their income because they don't have as high income, but percentage wise, they're spending the same percentage of their money, 100%. It's just on dumb things that aren't going to yield any sort of return. But when I invest, it's like in books, it's in my family. It's, hey, I want a new bow because that's going to help me accomplish this. I'm going to hire a mentor because he's going to accomplish this. I'm going to hire a new team member because they're going to help me accomplish that. And that's where high quality and high caliber men invest their money. Things that are going to return. They look at investments. I guess you could also say appreciating versus depreciating things, assets versus liabilities. All right, guys, last one for today. This one comes from Mr. Bob Ross. He says, I have a binder with all important documents and account info, insurance info, names of people who would be helpful in the event of my untimely death. What other steps could I take to help my wife in the event I die suddenly, attempting to protect and provide after my passing? Hey, first and foremost, I commend you for having this in place. A lot of people don't. Sounds like you've got a lot of bases covered. I would also say an electronic copy of these documents would be good because, things get stolen, things get lost. If there's a fire, documents get destroyed. You might keep them in some sort of fire retardant safe that'll keep these documents preserved. And then also making sure that she knows where to go if she needs these documents, if there was an untimely death on your part. I have a financial advisor and I have a friend who actually bought our financial planning practice. My wife knows where all of our financial documents and resources and all that stuff are, but she also knows to call Greg. If something happens to me financially, she can call Greg and Greg's going to help her out because he has access to a lot of this information as well. So having somebody, an advocate that could help in these situations, but then also I would say making sure that she's involved in the day-to-day financial decisions. More often than not, this is not exclusive, but more often than not, the man handles the money situation, right? So he does the budget. He has access to the bank accounts. A lot of times he's the one, he might be a sole bread earner like I am within our family dynamic. And so a lot of that falls on my shoulders, which is fine, but she needs to be involved in those processes. So investments, passwords, insurance documents, legal documents, having another advocate or two to help with some of these resources should something happen, and then making sure that you're having a weekly meeting about money and financial situations will help if that unfortunate and tragic situation were to ever happen. Okay. Good question. All right, guys. I think we got through a lot here. Hopefully I gave you some good answers. Hopefully some of that stuff serves you. That's ultimately the point. We're going to be back on, let's see, on Friday for our Friday field notes. And of course, next week for our interview show. And hopefully next week, Kip and I will both be here. But we got a lot of stuff to do. We got a lot of work to do. Keep the questions coming and we'll keep driving on. All right, you guys, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.